Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. One of the main reasons I love podcasting so much is, yep, you guessed it, I adore talking. However, speaking to myself alone in the room by myself is a little weird, and definitely not the same experience as when I get to speak to others who stimulate my curiosity, pique my inspiration, and remind me of how epic and infinite life can be. As such, this show has become a zone of excitement and growth for me of sorts, consistently allowing me to open myself up to the unknown, to others' subjective viewpoints of the world, and to find more meaning in the game of life we are all playing a part in. And today's episode is spot on to what I just described. Today's guest and I met some years back, and immediately connected over the fact that we both not only spent time in the cannabis industry, but we're also both passionate around the truth of cannabis being a psychedelic medicine, among many other things, such as our love and affinity for psychedelics, spirituality, and entrepreneurship, to name but a few. As such, we talked the last few years about doing a show, and the divine timing finally aligned for this week on the show. From a deep dive into his journey, to sharing philosophical thoughts, and more, this episode is a window into our personal relationship, and in my opinion, a perfect reminder of why connecting with aligned human beings is so important for each of us during our lives. So please give me a big hand in welcoming my man Seibo Shen to the show. Seibo, my man, dude, am I excited to be here with you today. You know, as I said in the intro to all of you guys tuning in, I met Seibo a couple of years ago, I think through Instagram. Like, I met a lot of my now very close friends, and, you know, he was part of the cannabis industry before, so we bonded around that. And we've tried to do this podcast, I think, 3 times now. And like the saying goes, the third time is officially the charm, man. So how you doing, brother? So excited to be here today with you.
Dude, I am doing great. It's almost unbelievable for me that we're actually here. For those that are listening, me and Ryan leave like these multi-minute long voicemails to each other. And we just, it's almost one of my best relationships that I have, just leaving these messages. And we've had to reschedule this so many times because things have come up. So I am super happy. I'm excited. I'm grateful to be here. So thank you for having me, Ryan.
Oh, dude, thank you so much for being here, man. And you know, where I like to start these episodes off for people, just to give them some context, is how you first got interested in the idea of psychedelic medicines. And cannabis, I definitely lump into other psychedelics, because I know, like I said before, you have a background in the industry, you used to make vaporizers, all this stuff. But where did this all start for Seibo?
Yeah, absolutely. So the story goes all the way back to 1997. I'm in my 3rd year in college. I had been trying to make the UCLA football team. I'm only 130 pounds, but I thought if I lifted, if I drank protein shakes, and I just kept disciplined and focused, I would be 200 pounds. And well, by my 3rd year in college, I thought, well, hey, I'm kind of not having as much fun and doing all the things that my friends are doing. So my roommate, he consumed an ounce of cannabis a day. I was trapping back in the day. One client, my roommate, he was a model for Gap, so he had tons of money. And by my 3rd year, he was like, Seibo, I've been telling you to give this a try. I finally tried it, and it opened up my third eye chakra. Like, I was able to see things from different perspectives. And I knew instantly this was something that I wanted to have as part of my life. And then I started creating my first vaporizer in 1997. So that was my entrance into psychedelics. And yeah, I do see cannabis as actually the most high I've ever been was eating 750 milligrams of edibles. And, ayahuasca, it was more intense than I would say even DMT, so I know the power of cannabis, and I am very respectful to Mother Marijuana.
Yeah, dude, it's wild how like edibles will make anyone respect the plant that isn't already respecting of it. I think a lot of us that are daily users or have been in the past or whatever, it's easy to normalize the effects of like inhalation methods, right? Sometimes you can go to concentrates and whatnot and get a little bit higher, but like there's kind of a ceiling, and you can't really go past that ceiling with inhalation methods the way you can with edibles. Like edibles, I mean, there is literally no ceiling. Like 750 milligrams, I mean, dude, I'm having people have ayahuasca level experiences just connecting with a couple of hits and breathe with cannabis. So I don't even know what medicine that would be relevant to, like Iboga or 5-MeO. Like, I mean, it's wild, dude.
Yeah, it was 72 hours. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even eat. I just had to power through it. So whenever I'm in like a really challenging plant medicine ceremony, I just think back to this is not more intense than the 750 milligrams. And back in the day in California, they used to sell 1,000 milligram brownies. So I know for sure I'm not the only one that ate like 3/4 of the brownie and started feeling like, whoa, this might be a little bit too strong for me.
You know, it is hilarious talking about the old days where you would just get given an edible and either they knew it was crazy potent, but they made it anyway, or you had no idea what it was going to
Yeah.
be. And you were like, well, I had brownies last week. It's probably going to be similar. Then you had a white knuckling, I think I'm going to die experience. And you're like, well, that was definitely stronger. And that's how we used to have to figure this stuff out. You know, these days, a lot of people can just go to dispensaries and get a 5 milligram, 10 milligram, and they don't realize how amazing it is that you can just do that now because there was a lot of trial by fire in those olden times.
Totally. I mean, I don't want to sound like one of those old curmudgeon-y guys, but yeah, in my day,
Yeah.
we used to just have to roll the dice, and
Mhm.
just be the guinea pigs for every single edible that we made because we had no idea how much cannabinoids were in the butter. And when I started making my own microdosing mushroom caps, I noticed the same thing. There were some capsules that were like probably 800 milligrams, some that were like 100 milligrams. And, me and my friends just popping them and just experimenting. But, I think that it really did switch my framework and my relationship with these plants and really understanding that, dosage is one thing, but you got to be really intentional. And I found that when I had the right intention, even if the dosage was stronger than I would have liked, it really helped me navigate that experience. And I am a parent, so when I'm microdosing and it is too strong, there are some times when I'm thinking like, well, okay, I got like 4 or 5 hours before I have to pick up the kids, and then kind of like thinking, will the effects kind of wear off by then? And just really having to be responsible. But then when I found with the right intention, it would last for 1 or 2 hours and really allow me to test the efficacy and find out, what is the exact amount to be putting into these microdoses.
Yeah, makes so much sense, man. You know, like what I think intention does is there's a quote, if you know your why, you can bear any how. And I feel
Mm.
like that's kind of what intention does, right? It allows you to realize your why, right? Like, why am I going to this experience? What am I looking to get from it? You know, how will I know if it's successful or quote unquote unsuccessful, even though there's no such thing? But how will I know all these things? And so then when you actually get into the experience, if it gets challenging, you have an anchor point, right? You know, based on your intention, why you chose to do this. So if you're going through a period of extreme uncomfortability, or you're going through anything like that, quote unquote, undesirable results, right? I talk about it often. They're not actually undesirable, but at the same time, if you're going through something challenging, you have a way to be able to actually go, okay, well, maybe all of this is working towards that intention. Like, so it really becomes your anchor point. So I'm glad you mentioned that because it is so true. So true. What is up, family? I wanted to take a second while you're tuning in to tell you about an amazing new product I recently began using. Now, you guys know I do ads very rarely, and my promise to you is that anything I speak about is something I personally have found value in using regularly. Well, recently, I came across a company called Brain Supreme, who sells microdoses of mushrooms mixed with adaptogens, nootropics, and other additions as well. And even though I've microdosed off and on for years, I have never felt results like these. In only 2 weeks, I'm sleeping better, I have far less mind chatter, my ability to perform has exponentially improved, and best of all, the sense of inner peace I've been feeling is like nothing I've ever experienced in microdosing before. Right now, you can get 15% off of any of their products when you use code SPRAGUE15 at checkout. And to find out more about them and grab some for yourself, head down to the show notes for this episode and begin your journey into microdosing today. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I love that. Having that anchor point has really helped me when I became much more intentional with my journeys. And, I have had many a white knuckling experience. And when I can remember the why, it just really allows me to better surrender and allow the medicine to do what it needs to do in my body and really get these transcendent experiences. And not just the transcendent experience, but, being able to integrate that into my daily life has just allowed me, I think, to navigate this polarizing country, this polarizing planet that we're on, and really stay focused and anchored on what I want to create and not be distracted on all the things that I really can't control.
Yeah, because let's be real, there are a lot of thirst traps right now in society. So many things vying for your attention. Like, please give me your attention. I mean, you think about politics, you think about all these things that are just breeding grounds for losing energy. Because at the end of the day, like, doesn't matter what side of the political landscape you're on, doesn't matter anything about that. It's like the idea that we, by bitching on Facebook or bitching on Instagram or whatever, are going to somehow make the world a better place is just silly, right? So one of the things I found throughout the time is that when you're intentional in one place in your life, it breeds into all the areas of your life, because how we do anything is how we do everything. So when we practice intention with cannabis, let's say, and we start realizing like, wow, this gives us an overall better experience, right? Whatever better is surmised for each person may be different. But once we realize we get better results utilizing that method, well, we're going to try that with water. We're going to try it with food. We're going to try it before we make love. We're going to try it before everything. And as we're getting more intentional with life, we're kind of putting conscious blinders onto the way, right? There's all these things, all these shiny objects vying for our attention, but
Mm.
we're just laser focused because we know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what we're looking to get from it. It's really powerful.
Yeah, man. I was working with one of my clients, really helping him focus on his vision. He's a successful business person, has done a whole bunch of different things, and has been successful at all of these different projects, but just wasn't feeling like the purpose and the fulfillment that he thought. And, it was that he didn't know the why other than wanting to be rich, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that anyone who has hit that point where whatever that number is in their head, 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, whatever it may be, have hit that number where they thought, okay, once I get to this number, my life is going to be set. When you hit it, you start realizing, well, I realized that, wow, okay, like I'm a t-shirt and jeans type of guy. Why did I have such a lofty goal? What was it that was empty in my life that I thought making more money would fill that hole? And yeah, as you said, when I do not have like a clear vision or intention of where my life is going, then my propensity to go online and participate in these things skyrockets. When I'm hyper focused on creating the things that I believe will bring more joy, more love, more compassion into the world, then it's like, yes, I'm aware of all the things going on, but I'm not allowing it to affect me. And if it is affecting me to a point where it is bothering me, then I will take some action. And that's where I found what was most useful for me was to be aware and to not be affected. But if I'm affected, then do what I can to take some action, and that will relieve some of that feeling of powerlessness or whatever I might be feeling by reading whatever type of news I'm reading.
Yeah, makes perfect sense, man. And, I think that's one of the big challenges, going around the world right now. I know I already mentioned it, but it's like this why, right? Like, why are we here? Why is any of this happening? Why are we a finite being in this lifetime, but everyone says we're infinite, right? Like this ability to ask why is something that the powers that shouldn't be have done a really good job of keeping us so distracted that we don't really have any downtime to quote unquote be bored anymore, which is
Mm,
naturally when people would start asking these questions like, who am I? What am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? What is my purpose? Right? Like those take a certain level of space to be able to actually even ask yourself, let alone get an answer for. And
yeah.
when I look at the world today, like I'm 33. So I grew up in a world where until I was about 13, 12, maybe I got my first cell phone, but it was like black and white Nextel i1000. So like you couldn't even play games on it. It was like stupid. So really until I was like 17, 18, I didn't really have any type of like smartphone or anything like that because they didn't really exist. So, I'm grateful that like I've now had from 18 to 33 be like all technology based, and 0 to 18 was kind of like the old school way of living, right? With small amounts of technology, cooler video game systems, things like that. But what I realized through that is that I had a lot of time to ask questions. I had a lot of time to be bored. I had a lot of time to start hobbies and things like that because there wasn't always something vying for my attention. And I'm
Mm.
grateful for that period because I don't know what it would have been like if I was born like, 15 years later. It's very interesting. I mean, you're a father, right? So like, what does technology look like, for not only your kids? I mean, I know you're probably doing some things to, kind of lessen the blow there, but as a parent who's probably interacting with other parents, who have kids that maybe are on screens a lot, like what does that look like? What's that landscape like right now?
Yeah, that is a very, very potent question. And before I answer that question, I definitely agree with you. I mean, I was in the rat race before COVID, just working, grinding, bragging that I only slept 3 or 4 hours, like
Mm-hmm.
bragging about that. Like, dude, you slept 5 hours, I slept four, dude. Like, I'm
Yeah.
working harder than you. And then COVID happened, and I had more time to hang out with my family, just think, maybe do some psychedelics because I wasn't doing much while I was traveling all the time, and really going, wow, like my time is preoccupied with a screen of some form, literally from the moment I wake up to when I go to bed. It doesn't matter if I'm scrolling or on a Zoom call or reading an article or listening to music. It just seems like the phone is my work device, my entertainment device, my time management device. It's everything. And yeah, so when I think about my kids, I kind of think about this technology the same way I look at cannabis or psychedelics. How you use it is how you're going to benefit from it. So, like most parents, when I saw my kids having a bad relationship with the screen, I wanted to limit them. But now I'm really just trying to teach them like there's a difference between something serving you versus you serving that thing, whether it's
Yeah.
cannabis, whether it's electronics. So I'm really just trying to teach them, how to have healthy relationships with whatever it is, food, electronics, video games. And one day I'm sure they're going to want to explore consciousness like their dad does. And, hopefully, everything that I've told them they're remembering. So I try not to have like black and white rules of like, hey, after 8 p.m., you can't do it because, well, what if you have to do a homework assignment? And just really help them have that sensitivity to knowing like, okay, hey, I want to use this device. Okay, I'm going to use it versus I'm bored. I have nothing to do. So might as well mindlessly scroll, just try to give them that granularity in their thinking.
Yeah, dude, I love that, man, because again, like that allows them to, it's essentially like teaching them to fish rather than just giving them a fish, right? Like you're not creating these arbitrary rules for them. Like, again, why does one parent say no screens past 8 and one says past 9? Is one better than the other? No, they're just arbitrary rules that these people are creating. And so if we want our kids to grow up and learn how to make their own devotion practice, right? Not even discipline, but devotion, we
Mm.
get to explain to them the plus sides of technology, how amazing it is, but also the detrimental effects. And we let them go through this process and maybe touch the hot stove a couple of times. You wake them up in the morning and they stayed up late. You're like, hey, sorry, you got to go to school anyway. And they start feeling that burn a couple of times and they start going, you know what? I don't want to do that late. And then you go, oh, that's interesting. What made you come to that conclusion? And they're like, well, I was staying up too late and I had to wake up for school and I was really like bummed out and very like frustrated and very anxious and whatever. And you're like, oh, that's what can happen when you expose yourself to blue light too light or any of these kind of concepts, right? That are really powerful to learn. But I love the way you do it because you do it through experience. You're like, no, maybe you should touch the hot stove a little bit, right? With my care, don't like burn yourself third degree on it, but like, like get your hand close to it and be like, oh yeah, that is really hot. Instead of just taking my word that it's hot and you just shouldn't touch it.
Yeah. If there's one thing that I've learned on my spiritual journey as well as my plant medicine journey is how little I actually know, and I would say that I don't want to say similarly to you. I'll just say myself, but I think we're two guys that can take in a lot of information and synthesize it and then regurgitate it to someone. And
Mm-hmm.
I know when I'm able to do that, it feels like I know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Just like when I watch like a new jujitsu move on a YouTube video, I feel like I know how to do this to someone in the gym, but when I try to do it, it's a completely different story. And that's where I started learning about like parenting and growing up as an immigrant, like I got bullied a lot. So I didn't want my kids to go through the same thing and just really protected them. And what I realized was by protecting them, they weren't like building up like the resistance and the grittiness and whatever you need to go through by experiencing something firsthand. So now I'm just like this really big believer that I'm always going to be there to support them and to comfort them. But if they really want to learn something, not just intellectually understand it, but like have it downloaded deep into the operating system so it's a part of something that they embody, they need to go through it themselves. And that's probably the most challenging part. Like if you're watching someone go through a challenging plant medicine ceremony or your kid's kind of suffering, you want to make them feel better. But, that's kind of what they have to go through at that time to really learn what they needed to learn at that time.
Yeah, man, it's so funny you mentioned this because I had a aha moment or a idea about 3 years ago where I coined this concept called knowing versus realizing. And that's like the idea because just like you said, I thirst trapped myself for a long time and thinking that the more books I read, the more facts I could recite off a, metaphorical fact sheet, that these things meant I was smart or that I embodied things. And like they say, actions speak louder than words. So, for instance, I could explain to someone why a certain pattern was either disempowering or empowering. But on either side of that, if it was disempowering, then I'm like, well, why am I still doing it? Or if it was empowering, it was, why am I still not doing it then? And so this idea of making it real for the I in the equation, realizing it, right, is like the idea of integration on the go, where it's one thing to understand like, hey, it can help you unlock more psychedelic effects of cannabis if you take a weekly break, right? If you understand that, okay, great. It's another thing to actually go, I'm going to take 3 days off this week and do it. These are two totally different things. And I think that a lot of the place the world is kind of stuck as a collective is that, I was just saying this actually to a client beforehand, but it's almost like a lot of people think that if you want to understand an apple, let's say, right? Let's just take that as an example. If you want to understand an apple, the right way to do it or the best way to do it or the most productive way to do it is to go find books on apples, find what seasons, they're active in, find the different varieties, study pectin, and boom, an apple. But what do they forget in that? To actually go eat an apple and see what it tastes like, see how it feels, right? Like, what is the experience of enjoying an apple? I think people kind of get it backwards, because for me, I used to do it this way. If I wanted to learn about something, I'd go study it like crazy. Now what I do is if I'm curious and it's not dangerous or whatever, I'll try it first, right? With maybe a little research. I'll try it. And then whatever I experience in that's what I'll then go research and be like, hey, why when I took LSD did this happen? Hey, when I took MDMA and felt my jaw clenching, why does that happen? And now I can study it from the basis of having an experience with it. And I think that has been a huge help in my life anyway, for sure.
Yeah, I really love that. I mean, there's definitely been, if we stick the context of plant medicines, like I've done so much research, I more or less like research my way out of wanting to take it because I read like different things of like, wow, this person, had a dark entity following them for like 3 months after doing XYZ. And so I like your framework where, you'll do a little bit of research just to know like, hey, if I do this, worst thing that's going to happen is I may like pass out or something, and then just allowing yourself to experience it. And, I found that to be so useful for just about everything in life, not just psychedelics, but like, starting a business. I think for a lot of people, like I have lots of friends that have MBAs that are much more, I guess, like from an education point of view, should know more about business, but they never get started. And they always ask me, how did I get started? And I was like, I don't know. I just bought something from a wholesaler, then asked other people if they wanted to buy it. And then I did that enough times where like a business just came out of it, So I really like just having like experience first and then having some knowledge to support it, but kind of utilizing both experiential and then I think what we're both not saying is like books aren't useless. There is value to that, but there is greater value when it's experiential and knowledge based too.
100% agreed, because what is a book, right? It's someone else's subjective view of the universe being given back to you in a digestible format that resonates with them. And so that's fine, nothing's wrong with that. But the challenge is if you only read the books. And then like you were saying with the psychedelics, right? You read someone's account and you're like, I'm not doing that now. Well, it's like, well, you just stopped an experience in your own life based on what someone else had experienced. And nothing says that you're going to experience the same things that someone else experienced. And so I think that's where a lot of the world gets stuck. It's where I got stuck for many years. Like, should I go travel to this place? I don't know. Some people say it's good. Some say it's bad. It's like, if it resonates and you have an intuitive pull to it, that's a really good reason, if you want to give it, that term, to be able to take action on that. And in doing so, you'll find some things that are probably relevant to you that you can learn from, right? Either, okay, that was a great experience and here's what I learned, or man, that one was a hot stove and here's why I won't do that again. But, it is what it is. I'm glad I tried it out. I think if we could merge, because really what we're talking about here is balance, right? We're not saying books are bad or this is bad or this is good and that is good or better, better or worse. We're saying like, no, it's a yes and here, right? Like both help, but in different ways. And I think our modern educational system has taught us that books are the only way, the best way, the most efficient way. Like they've taught us like it's all left brain. And then we have people coming in saying it's all right brain. And I'm like, no, guys, it's the middle, right? Like we wouldn't have a left brain if it was useless. But also, can we see the faults of being all left brained? And can we also see the faults of being all right brained, and how when you combine these things together, it gives us an ability to operate throughout our reality as a balanced individual? I mean, I think that's the goal, right?
No, totally. I mean, that's why there's the corpus callosum that connects the left and the right hemisphere. It's so that we could utilize both holistically. And, I really believe that, like, we were talking about how polarizing it is in the world. And in a way, like, just thinking COVID was 2020, it seems like 50 years ago, but
Wow.
I also know that, because of COVID, it really, like, it kind of like supercharged like my spiritual growth, just having more time to sit with these questions and to learn, that intuition wasn't just some knee-jerk reaction. What I've been shown by my guides is that intuition is like my higher self's way of like just dropping little breadcrumbs for me to follow. And when I see young children follow their intuition and then get scolded for it, I know I was scolded for it when I was younger. I realized, oh, that's why I was so disconnected as an adult. And so it's really awesome to kind of have this information and be like open to like my children telling me like they have an imaginary friend. And I used to tell them, well, that's cool, like just kind of placate them. But now I'm like, no, what did your imaginary friend say? Oh, it was something warm and loving. Okay, do you believe it? Like, what do you think about it? And kind of chat to them, not like they're imagining something, but chatting with them that they have like this extra sensitivity, that maybe adults don't have anymore, but that doesn't mean that what they're experiencing is not true just because someone else can experience it. And really kind of seeing my children step into their spiritual gifts and become more comfortable with it has been just this like really fascinating part about being a parent. And for myself, I didn't have my awakening till 4 years ago. So I was 44 years old. And I wouldn't say I was a hardcore atheist, but if someone showed me like Bashar or Abraham Hicks, I'd just be like, well, they're saying some good stuff, but why are they closing their eyes and pretending they're channeling some higher frequential entity? And just kind of maybe keep it at that. But now I'm just like, wow, they're just more sensitive and tapped in, and we could absolutely do that for ourselves and then gift that as an opportunity for our children to become these more open, higher frequential versions of Homo sapiens.
Yeah. And I think that's really what we're seeing, in a big way. Like one of the things I've been tapping into too is how, we teach kids manners and how to pay taxes, right? Obviously a lot more than that, but like I'm talking about mainstream, right?
Yep.
And they remind us that we are God. Now, those are like, in order for that to happen, it requires a parent or parents that are aware enough to understand that, first of all, which like we're coming into the age of Aquarius now, so more people are. But like, let's talk about even when I was born, like 91, my parents are amazing, but they didn't have like that kind of connection with God, right? Like even friends I know that grew up in like a really religious type household, they were taught like God's going to make you burn in hell if you don't do exactly what he says, right? Like that kind of view of religion. And so like, it feels like there's a shifting point happening now where people are starting to realize, like you were saying, like, no, my kids have lessons from me as well, because they still like, especially before 6 years old, like they're still really like one with God in a way.
Yep.
There's a story, I forget where it comes from, but you may have heard it before. Listeners, you may have heard it before, but there was this story of this mom who had a new baby and her other kid was like 3 or 4, I think, or something like that. And basically what she did was this 3 or 4 year old came in and said, "Hey, can I go hang out with the baby?" And so the mom was like, "Sure," but like kind of a little curious of why, right? So she lets the 4 year old go into the room and she kind of like hangs out with like an ear on the door type thing. And she hears the 4 year old talk to the baby and say, "Hey, can you remind me of what God's like? I'm forgetting." Right. And that's literally like what she was asking this baby to do. And so the mom was always like, "Whoa, that's wild." And when I heard that, I was like, yeah, it makes so much sense because, like, I had this funny analogy came to me because God speaks to me through comedy a lot of times. But I was in San Clemente, California, staying with one of my coaches, this guy, Angelo. He has a family. So I was there with his young son, who was probably like about 1.5, 2 at the time. And one day I was just watching him run around and throw shit around and just do his thing, be a 1, 2 year old. And it just kind of dawned on me. I was like, dude, like watching someone grow up is like watching someone come magnificently slowly out of a 5-MeO DMT experience, right? like at first they're just like unable to talk. They're just staring at you wide-eyed. They're shitting their pants, right? Like they have no awareness that they're a human. And then slowly but surely they start testing the rules of gravity and all these kind of things. And then eventually they get to the point of like being like, I don't know, around 6, 7, 8, where they're kind of like, all right, I got 2 feet in the ground for the most part. I kind of know most of my manners. I get how to like pay attention in school to a certain degree, right? Like they kind of been, I don't want to call it like societized, but in a way it's kind of like that. I'm not saying that's bad, right? Like it wouldn't be good for us to stick in the, the state of a 0-year-old forever. But the goal is, can you become an adult without getting adulterated? That's kind of like the juxtaposition I see here.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. I
fascinating.
mean, it's super interesting just observing. And I don't know what it's like to have an adopted child. I would assume it's just as interesting. But when you see like your genetics and your wife's genetics in like one person, and then you're seeing them grow up, we have 2 of them. And so one of them apparently is just like my wife when she was younger. And my younger daughter apparently is just like me when I was younger, except like a girl version. So watching them like evolve and grow and then like kind of find themselves, like my youngest just turned 10. So it wasn't too long ago when she was below 7, but like below 7, she was definitely like just in her body, no questions about what she wanted to do, would just follow her highest joy. And then now I could definitely see like when I ask her a question, like she'll kind of have like an impulsive response and then she'll kind of think and process. And in a way, like as you said, we all need to learn society's rules to be able to just, you know, get along with each other.
Yeah.
But there is like this kind of, I don't want to say disappointment, but like just seeing her go from this like super pure, I'm going to do whatever I want, to, well, Mary might not think that's cool, so I'm not going to do it, is kind of a bummer, but it is a great teaching lesson as an adult because, I would watch my kids spend hours like building like a castle with blocks or something. And then the second they want to do something else, they'll go do it. There's no attachment to the blocks. They'll even like just knock it over and I'll be like, "Oh man, I didn't take a picture." And they're like, "Well, I'll just go build it again. Why do you need to take a picture of it?" And just really be in the moment. And to me, that is one of the greatest gifts of just having children, is watching them like just be in the moment and then also watching them evolve. Because as sad as it is to see them almost forget, like you said, it's like, "Hey, I'm forgetting." I know that at some point, they'll start remembering again as an adult.
Makes so much sense, man. And one thing I don't think I've ever shared on the show before, I think I've only told like 2 people about this because it's just not something that really comes up in conversation that naturally, but it is coming up here, is I still remember the exact moment and day where my brain shifted from I just go play whatever to like, oh, wait, that toy was bought for me yesterday, so I should probably play with that one. Like, why am I not interested in that? Like, I remember that day. It was weird. Like, I woke up, I was probably around 6, 7, somewhere around there. And in my room, I had 2 big toy boxes in my room. And I remember, like, I don't remember what I was doing the night before, whatever, but I remember waking up and it feeling really weird. Like, I remember the feeling, I can't describe, it's a sensation, but I remember the feeling, I remember the smell in the air. And I remember like being confused as a kid and being like, wait a minute, like yesterday I could just go play with whatever. But like now I'm feeling this, like how I would describe it in words of today is like no, there needs to be some structure here. Like I go play with this for this amount of time and then I go here. Like I still remember that, dude. It's a really trippy thing that I've never really like talked about with anyone because it just doesn't come up in conversation, but it is fascinating to think back on. Do you remember a point where that shifted for you? I'm just curious.
Wow. The interesting thing is yesterday we were just talking about, when we realized Santa Claus was not real. And
Mm.
my younger daughter said, my older daughter, Sophie, told her so. And then I asked her if she was disappointed. She goes, no, I just kind of thought like it was weird that some guy could deliver presents to everyone in one night. And, so that was kind of like my come to Jesus moment of like, I remember that I was maybe 5 or 6, just understanding that when I was old enough to understand the concept of Santa Claus, I kind of had that same reaction that I think you had about the toys. Like all of a sudden I got like super rigid. I was like, nah, that's not real. Like there's no way like a guy could do that in one night. And, based on the way I see him on TV, he couldn't fit in our chimney. And I saw that the cookies I left out, were still there in the morning. Like someone else must have taken them. So there was like this like really weird, logical, rational side of me that came out because of the Santa Claus thing. So I think that was kind of like my version of just like going, oh, wait, a lot of this magical stuff maybe isn't as magical as I thought. It's just maybe my parents putting gifts there.
Yeah. It's interesting, man. As you were talking about that, I remembered another memory too. I was probably had to have been first or second grade. And it was St. Patty's Day, and my parents got married on St. Patty's Day. So it was kind of like a bigger holiday in our household than for most people. Not to mention we live in Boston, which is a big Irish population. But so I remember leprechauns were a big thing back then. And I remember my parents had left me some note and they had said it wasn't from them. They like made it all cool. It was like all like glittery and whatnot. And there was this whole letter from this leprechaun. And I remember I was so excited I brought it to school. And a couple of my like somehow friends were like, that's not real. Your parents wrote that. And I remember even like, no, they like, because I already knew Santa Claus wasn't real, but it was like I wanted to believe. There was a part of me that already kind of thought like maybe it's not. But like when everyone started telling me like, nah, that was your parents, I remember feeling like, damn, like, and I remember asking myself, like, is that how life's going to be? Like all the magic leaves. Like, I don't know how I thought about it in words of a 6-year-old, but reflecting back on it, I still remember I was in the cafeteria at Wasagus School, which is the school behind my parents' house. And I remember like yesterday, we were lining up to go outside and like walk to classrooms. We'd all hang out in there in the, kind of colder parts of the year. And until like, class was ready to start. And I remember walking through and it was my buddy Sean Blaze, which was, he was the guy that would do that. He'd always be like, that's not real. Like my whole life, dude, the guy was hilarious. But yeah, it was so funny, man. So that was like the second level of like, all right. And then I remember my parents told me at an Outback Steakhouse that Santa wasn't real. I was sitting there eating a blooming onion. I was probably like 10 years old and they're like, Santa's not real. And I was like, yeah, guys, I think I figured it out. But it's so funny thinking back to that shit, man.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, and I don't know if you believe in this or not, but last year when I did ayahuasca for the first time, I did come in contact with like elves, fairies,
yes,
leprechauns,
dude. Elementals,
Sasquatch. Yeah, elementals. And that's why I was like, whoa, okay. Like I remember my children telling me like they were interacting with elementals. And like I said, I wasn't gaslighting them. I was just kind of placating them. But when I had that experience of the elementals myself, and what it was showing me was just like they're in this frequency that is just a bit higher than where we're at. But when we kind of expand our frequency band, we'll see them every once in a while. Or if you're like maybe a camper in the woods and you smoked a doobie or ate some shrooms, you might see Bigfoot walking by. And then when you go look for him, he just goes into another dimension. So you don't see him. But yeah, having that visceral experience with the elementals. And then I've had them come without any exogenous molecules put in my body. It really made me go, whoa, okay, this makes sense of like all the folklore and all the fairy tales where this comes from. Because as I started just really double downing on the meditation and reaching out to my guides and trying to, just get some information channeled through me, they were showing me like there was a previous world where like these like telepathy and these inner sense organs were like far more developed. And then it reminded me of this like Rudolf Steiner quote about like how man will keep making technologies outside of himself until he realizes they're just poor carbon copies of what's within. Like all
Yeah.
these things just started clicking in my head. So my logical, rational brain could be like super open to like metaphysics and things of that nature because without like that firsthand experience, I would read about this stuff and I was like, cool, I would like to have a Kundalini awakening, or I would like to know what it feels like to be one with every single atom in the universe. And then once I had the experience, I was like, holy shit, okay, now I see. And when I say now I see, I wasn't seeing with these two eyes. It was just like this paradigm shift and, just became open to a lot more of these things. And once I realized I was open to it and had more sensitivity, I just was able to interact with these higher frequential beings. That's the best description I could think of, higher
Dude,
frequential beings more easily.
it makes perfect sense, man. I mean, like when we think about like Lord of the Rings, for instance, or we think about Star Wars, like in one way, right? Knowing versus realizing, right? Left brain versus right brain. Left brain people would say, dude, it's just a story. He invented it. Right brain people would say, okay, yeah, we know it's a story. He invented it, but where did he get the inspiration from? Where did that come from? Because you look especially at Lord of the Rings. I mean, the dude has like languages for the different sects of beings in that, right? Like that's not something that just pops into your mind one day and you're like, oh, let me write it down, right? Like that's something that got channeled without the ability to understand what channeling is at that time in history. And also, let's think about like it wasn't too long ago. Like I live 45 minutes from Salem, Massachusetts, where if you were channeling, you got fucking stoned to death, or burned at the stake. So like, you better believe that's still in our DNA, So I think for a lot of us, now the age of Aquarius is like, hey, it's cool to let your free flag fly high. But I think we have to realize that like also, even when I was a kid or you were a kid, it was a very different world. Like if you were out there saying you were channeling higher vibrational frequencies and beings, you'd be like, they'd be like, okay, maybe we got to give you a lobotomy or something.
Yeah.
Like it wouldn't have been well received. And I remember when I went to the mystery school, they had a really cool class called 12 Races of Earth. And it was all about how all of these elemental beings were actually the children of the Elohim who came here before Adam.
Oh,
So
wow.
Adam and Eve is like the next rendition of different beings, right? Human beings. But before that, it was the children of Lilith, and they were elementals. They didn't have souls like we have necessarily, right? And that's not a bad thing because their mission was not to discern between good and evil because their mission was not to end up like God, right? Like our mission here in this lifetime, our ultimate muscle to wield is discernment, so that we can really figure out what is truly good, aka what is God, because good and bad aren't really real, but what is God and what is the absence of God? That's really what we're here to figure out, right? So when we see a marketing commercial of like, are you injured? Call this number now or whatever, right? Like there's a feeling that will hit us if we tune into that, right? Like, does that person really feel like they can help me out or not? That is the ultimate school to wield here. Because again, like you may have someone in your family, right? Especially after the COVID stuff that was like, Seibo, you have to get the vaccine, right? And so they think they're coming from a pure intention, right? And in their world, they are. Like they want to help you. They think that's how they're helping you, et cetera. They're scared about losing you or getting, you getting
Yep.
hurt. But you have to be the one to be able to weigh that and go, that's not good for me. That doesn't feel like God to me. And so like that's really the entire reason we're here, according to this theory. So it's interesting when you look into the past because vampires are part of the elemental family, fairies, dwarves actually aren't, which I call bullshit on because I'm like, dude, dwarves are definitely part of that. But, again, like a lot of these elemental beings, they're still here. And the way that I talk about it is they're not here, but they're in a different frequency. So it's kind of like if you were a kid and you only had analog television, right? Like channel 7. And then all of a sudden your buddy across the street gets pay-per-view, right? Same TV, same antenna, but he's able to pick up different frequencies. That's kind of what happens when we start eating better, we start connecting with psychedelics, we start meditating, we start opening up the pay-per-view that's always been there, but we just haven't been aware of it. And so it's very interesting that when you do that, you start coming into contact with a lot of these different beings, right? And you realize that why wouldn't they be here? It makes all the sense in the world once you start actually talking with them and stuff. But yeah, it was very interesting, that whole theory of like the elementals being the children of Lilith and human beings being the children of Adam and Eve. Very interesting.
Yeah, that is really cool. I've never heard that. Thank you for sharing
It
that.
was cool. I
And
love that class. It was so fun.
what's the craziest thing is I don't know if you've seen this video before, but there's this guy on YouTube, and he put out a video called The Discovery. It's a 5-minute video, and it's basically like he figured out if you smoke DMT and you get a 650 nanometer diffracted laser and you shine it against the wall and you keep your eyes open, you start seeing like these Hebrew and kind of Japanese katakana, like just like in the Matrix. And then as you scan up and down with the laser, it just reveals like different lines of code, and literally everyone sees the exact same code. And to me, like I was like, oh man, like when I talk about fairies or Sasquatch or like people like Bashar or Abraham Hicks, I can see why some people are like, okay, well, maybe not. But man, when I showed people this video, I was like, dude, this guy could recreate, like, show you the Matrix. They're just like, that's cool. And then, hey, how about the Warriors game? And I'd be like, man, I just kind of talked about the fundamental nature of 3D reality, and maybe this might not be the truth of it. And here's like a repeatable methodology. And you want to talk about the 3-point contest. It kind of like blows my mind of like what interests people. But, I really love what you talked about. I think it's if your brain as a frequency tuner isn't wide enough to accept this pay-per-view signal, then that pay-per-view signal might not even be something that's interesting to you to pick up. I just thought, man, so many of my friends, like we loved The Matrix when it came out. I know you were only a few years old, but we were like 18, 19. So we were just like into acid, into like, is this reality? And then we see this movie and we're like, holy shit, someone else has thought about this other than us. And so when I showed my same friends this, and they were like, that's cool, but do you see like Steph Curry got MVP? I'm like, oh yeah, it just kind of blows my mind, but it is just kind of interesting, like where people's interests fall. And when we talk about these things, to me, it lights me up like no other. But I guess some people just aren't in that frequency range.
Well, I think of it like this too, right? Like, modern schooling is a good example. We've kind of surmised that most people at 6 years old are at a first grade level, but you also have those outliers, right? The people that when they're 6 years old, maybe they don't even know how to read and they have to start to do like a triple repeat of kindergarten. We also have the other side where someone at 6 years old is just naturally a savant. There was a Disney show around that. I forget the name of it, but this was one kid who skips a bunch of grades. Do you remember the name of that? It was probably past your time, but I'm just curious if you remember it.
Oh, no, I don't remember it.
It was like this guy who was like, he was probably like, 10 and he was in high school, a senior, because he was so gifted at like, just intellect or whatever, intellectual knowledge. So, again, we have those kind of outliers, right? But mostly like 6 years old equals first grade, 7 equals second, et cetera, et cetera. So when we look at like the whole idea of what you're talking about, right? The way I think about it is like this. The way I think about it is, based on previous lifetimes, based on a lot of shit that we don't remember because we've been men in black essentially, right? It starts coming back as we start tuning in. But we're all even though we may look a similar age, we may be doing similar things at a similar age, we don't all have the same level of consciousness. And this isn't like a hierarchy thing. It's probably like those of us that have eyes to see in this lifetime probably have gone through thousands of lifetimes where we didn't, right? So now we're just coming into like, oh, we've had enough reps and we're starting to open up. Whereas some people around us, you can tell they're at a certain level that is perfect for them, right? There's nothing wrong with it. But also it becomes like kind of confusing, right? Because you're looking at these people and, they seem similar age. They were interested in other things, right? Or like similar things when you were younger. And then they just go a different direction. And in one way, that's obviously what makes life beautiful. But in another way, that's also what makes us all go reach out and find each other, right? Like that's why I started this podcast, because I know firsthand how weird it can be to try to find people that are interested in like these kind of conversations, right? Fairies, dwarves, elementals, raising kids in the unique way that you are, like all these different things. And that's the beauty of life in a way, right? Like we get to find the people that resonate with us, but that's the way I've thought about it for a little while is like, oh, I imagine there's many lifetimes where I've been like completely a goofball, asleep, whatever, just having fun, and for whatever reason, I don't really even need to know why. This lifetime is one where I'm waking up a lot and I'm starting to realize these things. And so it's honestly cute in a way. It's kind of like if you go over to your kid when they're 7 years old and you're like, hey, I just got a promotion at my job. And they're like, cool, dad. Like, cool. Like they're playing with Play-Doh and they're like, yeah, but check out this sick little figure I made. And you're like, in one respect, you're like, what? Like, Now, again, you wouldn't be like this. I'm talking about normal parents, but
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
it might be hard as a parent to understand how your kid's not excited about that. But they're meant to be excited doing what they're doing right now. And we're meant to be excited doing what we're doing. And so that's like how I've kind of moved through that. Cause I had that, not even challenge, just curiosity. Like, wait, what's going on here? Like, I'm giving you the codes of the universe, But also, like, I think part of it is like, for whatever reason, maybe they're Steph Curry or whatever is like their not God, but like their pathway in this lifetime for whatever reason, That's my best guess anyway,
No, I mean, it's interesting because it totally reminded me of like the spiral dynamics framework of like, yeah, people are just in their level. It's not better or worse. It's just they have different sets of core values depending on what level they're in. And there are definitely positive and negative manifestations of each level. And I think that if you're anything like me, like I'm just super curious. So when I find answers to things, I want to share them with people. And when they don't have like the same reaction, I'm always like, whoa, like I guess maybe it was just interesting to me to know that the Matrix was real and not make believe. And to other people, 3-point shooting is much more important, So I get it. I get it. So thanks for the reminder.
Oh, dude, of course. And trust me, you can always reach out to me about anything regarding the Matrix being real or actually the Matrix being false, but the illusion being real. Like, that's why we stick together. It's like I pride myself in being that person for a lot of my friends and vice versa. I'm sure, you're the same way with your friends, et cetera. But like, it's typically the cannabis people. Like, I found this out. This is another theory I have that I'm curious to run by you. But at least for me, when I was in high school, like everyone smoked weed. Like everyone did, right? But I remember when I got to around age 18 or 19 and I left school and I started I was still hanging out with a lot of people from high school, but I was in college now. The amount of cannabis users dwindled a little bit. And then now that I'm 33, it's like, no, there's only like a couple people I know that I went to high school with that are still connected with cannabis. And I started asking them why, and they were like, oh, it was all great and fun and games until I had some crazy experience where I got paranoid and just never again, right? And so I think those of us that have continued connecting with cannabis specifically are the ones that are naturally more open to all of the stuff we're talking about, because it's just really hard to connect with a psychedelic and not be open to it.
Yeah. I definitely followed the same kind of like thing with my friends as well. And, we started the podcast talking about edibles. And usually the story is I had to quit because I ate too many edibles and it was super uncomfortable. And, I think I don't know what it is, but there was something about like having an experience that was hard for me to handle that actually made me want to experience it again, to see if like I could do it, but maybe not be so freaked out. And, I think, starting off as in my 20s and then now being in my late 40s, and really understanding what surrendering means, like I think when I heard the word surrender, I was just like, how do you give up? Like in my mind, I didn't understand like what surrendering meant. But now, now that I'm in my almost 5th decade of life and 3rd decade with psychedelics, really understanding, as you said, there are no bad trips and they're there to either help you see something or be able to surrender to something that you're really trying to control. That has made all the differences. And that doesn't mean every psychedelic journey is awesome. I definitely still have a lot of challenging ones when I'm going through it, just like, why did I do this again? But when I come out of it, it's always just, a new higher frequential version of me that is more sensitive to these beings and entities that are out there and really seeing how wonderful and beautiful the world is. And what my guides have told me was like, Seibo, this is great, but you chose to come into 3D space time to have a specific experience. So don't forget, to do what you're supposed to do here. And then I'll be like, well, what I'm supposed to do? I'm like, they're like, we're not here to tell you, like, what you're supposed to do. But yeah, it was great to kind of get that advice of like, doing all this inner work is great, but, don't forget to live your 3D life at the same time. Eat some fried chicken.
Yeah, dude, exactly. That's exactly, dude. I'm so glad you mentioned that. Because I think that's what the Bible meant when it said the meek shall inherit the earth, right? Like, there's many different explanations for that statement. But what it always brought up to me was that the most powerful people I've met are the ones that are really non-dualists, So like a Buddha, for instance, like a Buddha would never tell you should or should not consume alcohol, nicotine, drugs, psychedelics, whatever. They would hit all the buttons and they would just go to what makes them feel closer to God. That's it. If it was psychedelics all day, every day, that's what they would do. If it wasn't for their subjective universe, they wouldn't. And they would never try to tell anyone else what to do because that's everyone's own ability as God to decipher and determine and discern for themselves. And so like, I love that view of like, hey, it's great to do these ice baths and sauna and exercise and all this stuff that we do, but also like, don't forget to go like play in the park, be a goofball, play with your kids, play some video games, have some fun. Because at the end of the day, everything here is a lesson in disguise, right? Like you can find God anywhere, right? Like you can find God in Xbox, you can find it wherever, right? And so like, there's not really a place you can't find God unless you're not looking for him or you don't know that it exists, And so once you kind of get the memory back, right? And it comes in waves, of course, of like, hey, this isn't all we are, then anything becomes a spiritual doctrine at that point, And so I just love that component of the life. It's so cool.
Yeah, well, if I could double tap on that, like the latest meditation that I was doing, the little download that I got was, well, one of the things that I've been working on is how to recycle vaporizers. And I figured that out. I figured that out. So huge problem to figure out. And my guides were telling me that like, this is great. This is going to be like something that would be awesome on your resume, but the true kind of like showing that you've really expanded and elevated is not doing these grandiose things, but it was what you just described, seeing God in everything. And when you could see God in everything in the most mundane thing, that's when you'll know like you're really advancing. Like creating a way to recycle vapes, great for your planet, great for all of that external validation. But no, in order to recognize God, it's not about doing something great and grandiose that everyone benefits from. It's being able to see it in the mundane day-to-day things, like chop wood, carry water, right?
Yeah, man. I love that. Seibo, this has been amazing, dude. I wish I could keep talking to you over and over and over again. I'm going to have to get you back on for round 2 because we could keep this conversation going for at least 3 more hours, if not a lot more. But I want to make sure I give people an ample opportunity to know where they can find you, connect with you, find out about all the new things coming out. Where can I send people, man?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Thanks for allowing. It's the same handle for TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, just at Seibo Shen. SEIBOSHEN. And if you guys want to email me, seibo@seiboknows.com. I answer every email and just really appreciate this, Ryan. And man, it took like 6 months to schedule this. This hour blew by in like 5 minutes. So we'll definitely do it again. And I'd love to return the favor and have you on my show.
Yeah, dude. You let me know when. We'll co-create some magic and continue our cross-pollination. I have one last question for you, man, that I like to ask everyone that comes on. Let's say someone listens to this episode and they're really excited to check out the idea of psychedelic medicines and see if they apply to their own life. What is the one piece of advice you could offer them to see whether or not and help them discern if whether or not these medicines are right for them at this moment in their life?
Wow. I would say that if they are exploring, then most likely it is the right moment in their life. There's a reason why they're exploring. And if I could take your answer from before is do enough research to make you feel comfortable and then just go do it. Do enough research to make you feel comfortable. And I feel pretty confident in this. I mean, I was like a 13, 14, 15-year-old messing around with this stuff, would more information have been better? Probably, but I still kind of learned while doing it. And so I would say that number one is if you're curious, it's probably the right time. Number two is just get enough information so you know that you could be safe so that when you go, you could completely surrender to the medicine. And the last piece of advice is get a referral from someone, get a referral from someone that's actually gone and had their space held by a specific shaman or page and do it that way. I wouldn't gamble on just some random person that you found online. I really feel like it's important for me to feel confident and safe in order to have the deepest experience possible. So I would ask a friend for a recommendation.
Definitely, dude. I love all those 3 pieces of wisdom are very wisdomful. Having the right person, doing just enough research, but not getting too stuck into it, right? Balance, right? That's what we're talking about, balance. Guys, I am so excited that I finally got Seibo on. I hope you guys loved this episode. Make sure you got into the show notes, give him a follow, send him an email if you have any questions for him, and stay tuned because he will be back on. If you guys are new to the show and you haven't left a review yet, make sure you go leave a 5-star review. It helps us so much get the show out to more and more people, which we are so excited about. And until next time, may you guys have the best day ever, and to infinity and beyond. Much love, everybody.
Infinity and beyond,
Peace.
dude. Love Lightyear, brother.
Let's go.